Hey guys, welcome to today's topic. We're going to talk about transplanting tomatoes out into the garden. It's getting that time of the year, and there's a few things we need to consider or do before you actually plant the tomatoes. The first thing is when you're buying a tomato plant, we want to be looking for a healthy, nice tomato plant with showing no signs of disease or anything like that. And so the two that I have selected out here today are going to be Park's Whopper Improved, it's on the tag, and Celebrity. Now, with that being said, there's two types of varieties of tomatoes. There's an indeterminate variety. An indeterminate, and they'll be on the tag, it will say indeterminate tomato. This is Parker's Whopper Improved, and that means it's going to produce tomatoes from now when we plant it till frost. So that's very important because the other tag that I have, the other variety I have, it's called a Celebrity tomato. And it's actually a determinate tomato. It's got it here on the tag. And so when it says determinate, it's going to have its scheduled blooms, fruit, and everything. It's going to come off all at once, and then it's through, and then the plant dies. So the indeterminate is more or less indefinite blooms and stuff. It carries me on through till frost, meaning I'm going to have producing tomatoes there. This one, it's going to produce all of its tomatoes coming on in a short period of time, and it's over and done with. So that's the two things you need to really look for in that, is making sure that plant is disease-free, and then what type of plant is it. Another thing to consider when you're looking at the plant tag on tomato, look for the little alpha characters underneath the name. It's got disease resistance. So for instance, this Park's Whopper Improved has a V, the letter V, the letter F, the letter N, and the letter TMV. And what that is these are diseases listed that they are resistant to. So V, for instance, is verticillium wilt resistant. F is fusarium resistance. N is nematode resistance. And TMV is tobacco mosaic virus resistance. So again, tomato plants are bred with these disease resistance bred into their lines. So if you had that disease in the past and it's in your soil, you might want to consider buying a tomato that's resistant to that disease. So back to planting tomatoes, you know, it's the most popular fruit/vegetable that people plant in their garden. And so we're going to talk about the proper ways of doing it. So with the tomato, the first thing to do is have a nice, good quality tomato transplant, pull it out of its container, and we're going to see all these roots. We want to more or less rip these little roots apart gently because we want to encourage the root growth to go out into the bed, into your garden. And if you notice, this is a taller transplant. So tomatoes are one of the things that, well, pretty much the only vegetable that roots all along the nodes and the internodes. A lot of other plants just root at the node. This roots in between, meaning it roots on the nodes and in between the internodes. So I can get roots all along this. So this is actually one plant that I can bury deeper than what it's actually grown in, and it's going to root. So a lot of people with a tomato plant, due to the fact they have it in their garden for a long period of time, want a really established root system and a large root system. So I'm going to look at this tall one and say, hey, I'm going to plant this one pretty deep because I have all this extra stem. So the first thing I'm going to do is take this tomato plant and I'm going to take off these leaf bracts, snip them off, and I'm left with this whole big exposed stem area. I am then going to dig a hole deep in this, and again, make sure you have nice friable soil. If you look at this, it's pretty nice and friable. And I'm going to dig this really pretty deep. And when I do that, I'm going to set this tomato plant down in this hole really, really deep up into that bracket. And when I do that, I'm going to cover that up. Once I've done that, I know that this is going to root all the way along, and I'm going to get a nice root system. Another thing to consider is if I'm looking at this plant and I have already blooming blooms on it, or maybe I've got little fruit on it when I plant it, I want to pick those off. I mean, it's going to be hard, but go ahead and take them off because I want all the energy going down into the root system. On the next plant, again, we're going to plant it. It is the determinate variety, and it is Celebrity. You need to know that when you're planting tomatoes, you need to plant them at least 3 foot minimum space between that in your garden. So I'm going to pull it out of this container. I'm going to look at that root system. I'm going to undo it, and I'm going to dig another hole in there, and I'm going to plant this tomato plant pretty deep. And again, I want a nice root system on that, so I'm going to actually clip these little leaf brackets off on that. And I'm gonna plant that all the way up to that leaf bracket. Once I do that, I'm gonna cover it up to that leaf bracket, and we have them both planted. So with that in mind, I'm gonna make sure that I give them a douse of soluble fertilizer, and this is just to make sure that they get started on the right foot. So with that being said, I actually have a bucket of water, a gallon of water. I'm actually getting my water-soluble plant food, and this one's actually Miracle-Gro water-soluble tomato plant food, which I really like for my tomatoes. I'm gonna take it out here, and there's a little measuring spoon with it, and they make it really convenient. So you just take a tablespoon of that with the measuring spoon, and that is 1 spoon to a gallon of water. I'm gonna stir this up really well so it's all mixed in. And then I'm gonna water thoroughly each transplant to make sure that it's getting a nice, well-watered root system. And then also it's gonna settle the dirt and stuff around it. And then once that is watered in, I'm gonna actually make sure that everything looks good around the plant, and we're good to go. So all we gotta do now is watch it grow. So later on, as these are growing, we'll go through and do a trellising one, because with tomato plants, usually it requires some type of staking or some kind of trellising on it. So with that in mind, we're gonna go ahead and stop for the day. Thanks.